Good afternoon. My name is David Lee, and I'm the Director of Education for the Dallas Historical Society. Founded in 1922, we collect, preserve, and exhibit the heritage of Dallas and Texas to educate and inspire present and future generations. For more information about the Dallas Historical Society and upcoming programs, please visit www.dallashistory.org. Educators, please sign the attendance form in the lobby and pick up your certificate after the lecture if you want CPE credit. Welcome to the Brown Bag Lecture with Dr. Richard McCaslin, sponsored by Belmont Village Senior Living. Richard B. McCaslin is the Director of Publications for the Texas State Historical Association. He is the former TSHA Professor of Texas History at the University of North Texas and has written or edited 20 books. These include Tainted Breeze, The Great Hanging at Gainesville, Texas, October 1862, which won a Tullis Award, Lee in the Shadow of Washington, which won a Laney Prize and Slatton Award and was nominated for a Pulitzer, Fighting Stock, John S. Ripford of Texas, which got a Pate Award and Bates Award, At the Heart of Texas, 100 Years of the Texas State Historical Association, 1897 to 1997, which won an Award of Merit from the Texas Philosophical Society, and Saratoga on the Cibolo, Sutherland Springs, Texas, which received a publication award from the San Antonio Conservation Society. A TSHA Fellow, he has also commendations from the Civil War Roundtables in Dallas, Fort Worth, and Shreveport for his academic work. Please join me in welcoming him to the Dallas Historical Society to discuss Pompeo Coppini, Defining the Historic Landscape of Texas.
Okay, I'm going to tell you straight up, I've had bronchitis for a week, so that's why I have a piece of something in my mouth. I'm not being rude. I'm just trying to be able to talk for at least 45, 50 minutes. And then maybe get through the Q&A without gagging. And I may disappear behind the curtain every moment. My wife has kindly made a big jar of hot English tea for me to keep the throat open. Hey, we've been married over 45 years. She knows when I'm down. Advertising portion of the program. I now work for the Texas State Historical Association. I am the Director of Publications. We are the oldest academic press in Texas. I used to say we have almost 200 books. I've been going through the inventory list lately. I think we have well over 200 if you count all the different versions. Excuse me. So, if you have a book, love to see it. If you have an interest in Texas history, we publish the Quarterly, the oldest continuously published academic journal in the country. Take that, Connecticut, New York, Philadelphia, Massachusetts. Notice the key word there, continuously published. They're all older than us, yes, but they missed an issue or two. We've never missed one yet, and we're moving very hard to try and make that never happen. So we have a journal, we have books for high school and college history organizations. That's the Texas Historian and the Touchstone. We have an annual meeting. We have other events throughout the year. We have a podcast once a month. Tonight it's on a fellow named James E. Brasher who's bringing out a book on the period of time between the Alamo's fall and the Goliad massacre and forward all the way to San Jacinto. If you usually talk about that in the Texas Revolution, you have the Alamo fall, you have Goliad, and then there's blip, suddenly it's April 21st, right? You lost a month. What the heck is going on? Well, Houston did try to fight a campaign at that time. He just decided that it was not the right time and place for a bloody showdown on the Colorado River. So that'll be the subject tonight. But we have a broad variety. Juneteenth next month, one of my former doctoral students at UNT will be talking about a book he brought out many moons ago on Juneteenth in Texas and the United States. So that's my advertising portion. We are alive and well. We're growing back. I'd be happy to talk to you in the corners if you want to about the debates back and forth and what's going on in Texas history as a field. If you want to ask Q&A, I will answer them, but be scared because I will tell you very blunt answers. I'm infamous for that. And my wife is not here, also known as my filter. So having said all that, here we go with what we're supposed to be talking about today, which is Pompeo Coppini. How the heck did I get started on Pompeo Coppini? I got involved with a group of descendants of Hood's Texas Brigade called Hood's Texas Brigade Reactivated. They were having a rededication of the Hood's Texas Brigade Monument in 2010 on the Capitol grounds. And they found me and asked me if I'd do a talk. I did, and I became fascinated, not just with the monument, but with the guy who made it. And it just stunned me that this man had done over 200 works in his life, 76 public monuments. Most of what we think we know when we think of an image of Texas history has a lot to do with his imagery, what he created. And so it really surprised me that as I'm preparing, nobody had written a biography of him. He'd been pretty much totally forgotten, even though his academy still operates and teaches children how to do art and adults in San Antonio to this day. So I thought I would spend some time with him. The book is not finished. I have no books for you. I'm 5 chapters into an 8-chapter book. It will be finished, I hope, soon, but then I keep saying that, and people come and ask me to do things like be director of the TSHA publications. So we'll see. I hope it will come out someday because it's an important subject. Why is he important? Because he defines the historical landscape of Texas. He's largely forgotten, or if he is remembered, it's sometimes for not things that we want to appreciate anymore, or we think we don't. He is #1 in the country for statue removals. And we'll talk about that. Oddly enough, though, only 16 of the 240 plus works that he did in his life had anything to do with the Confederacy. And we'll talk about that as we go through. His life has different phases, such as the life of an artist. You look for sponsors. And what he was looking to sponsor, what he was wanting to do, is to make sculpture that mattered, that told the story of a people. His mentors in Italy, and he was from Italy, told him that pretty girls and flowers make wonderful statues as decorations. But if you want to make sculpture that matters, it has to tell the story of a people. It has to tell a story about them and about themselves and how they view their history. And so that's what he was always seeking, and that was his greatest work. And a lot of his work, you'll see, has that theme to it. In the course of doing that, he will help rebrand Texas. I was just talking to an author the other day who was bemoaning the fact that his book was not being reviewed in journals back east. I said, journals back east don't know Texas exists. Specifically, journals back east that do Southern history don't think of Texas as a Southern state. We've done a fantastic job of rebranding ourselves as what? A Western state. Yeah. And so, thanks to Pompeo Coppini. I'm not starting yet. This is all my setup. We're going to be here a while. Hang in there. No, let's go. There we go. This is the young man at about 1908. He would be, by that time, 38 years old. He's in New York and things are going well, you can tell. He was born in Moglia, Italy, which is a small town in northern Italy, middle of nowhere, really, in 1870. His dad was an engineer on a railroad, not the cool kind that gets to drive the trains, the kind that builds the rails and the beds and the bridges. Also a frustrated musician. His dad was always in the local symphonies. He was a frustrated artist is the best way to put it. So when young Coppini goes to his dad and says, I don't want to be an engineer, I want to be an artist. I want to paint, I want to sculpt. His dad says, no, you need to get a real job like I did. So Coppini flunked his math tests and he ran away. He was about 16 years old. And so Dad made a deal. Okay, I'll send you to art school for 1 year, and we'll see how it goes. He sent him to the Academy in Florence. Any of y'all ever been to the Academy in Florence? It's the place where the David is on display. So it's not like Dad sent him to a second-rate art school, right? Sent him to one of the best in the world. And Coppini, as Dad, I think, knew, showed up a year after everyone else did. It was a 4-year program, and Coppini showed up when he only had 3 years left to finish it, which he did as the #1 student in all 3 years. He thrived. He loved it. He had a great time, and Dad had to admit, okay, you beat me. And so Coppini is launched off to be an artist. His greatest mentor there, and I keep trying to make sure I'm on my mic, is Augusto Rivalta. Here's a Camilla de Cavour by Augusto Rivalta. Obviously, Rivalta is a sculptor. Rivalta is a guy that focuses on historic images, like Cavour, like King Umberto II of Italy. He also did Garibaldi. In other words, Coppini learned at the foot of a master some very important points, not only classic style sculpting in stone and bronze, but also that your sculpture has to have a meaning. It has to have a face. It needs to tell a story. And so Coppini will cling to that throughout his career. There will be many other things that he does. You got to pay the bills, right? But the good stuff, the stuff that he focused on, will be those sorts of things. Now, what's the difference between bronze and marble? Well, Coppini would have thought you were a failure if you stuck only with marble. Marble also is too soft. It should only be used for indoor sculptures. You may have seen some badly damaged outdoor marble sculptures. Bronze was the penultimate material. And so Coppini will always be striving to do bronzes, which is hard work if you do it their way. I mean, they do it the Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo way, these neoclassicists. They went to hospitals and studied cadavers, and so when they would build a statue, the first thing you do is you build its skeleton out of everything from PVC plastic pipes to copper tubing to wire to boards. You build a skeleton. Then you put its insides on it with clay, with whatever you've got. Then you build the skin on it. Skin, not clothes. There's a point at which your sculpture is naked, to the great amusement of American newspaper reporters who would come in and see, a stark naked Sam Houston standing there 9 feet tall. Coppini didn't think that was odd. Then you put the clothes on it. This is a meticulous process that takes a lot of time, except not for Coppini. Having gone through school in a hurry, he will stay in a hurry for the rest of his life. So he comes out of school, all ready to go, still in Italy. Figured he would start out, with big sculptures. Made one, it fell over. Should have paid more attention in class. So he ended up making cheap copies of Roman statues and Greek statues for tourists, busts of local celebrities, starving to death, and until 1896, he came to New York City with $40 in his pocket. Count up, he's 26 years old, he cannot speak a word of English, he's got $40 in his pocket. He's going to starve to death, isn't he? And he just about did. But there were some people who were artists in New York that weren't about to share their glory or the big paychecks, but they needed helpers. So they started picking him up. A couple of his projects that he did that we can clearly see his impact are the Court of Neptune found at the Library of Congress, definitely neoclassical. And then he got the job of working with the Francis Scott Key Monument in Frederick, Maryland. This got him a double bonus. The artist, whose name is totally escaping me right now, gave him the task of doing the Columbia and the other small figures at the base. So this is all pure Coppini work. Wasn't allowed to put his name on it, but there's plenty of records. And he got not only the credit for that beautiful piece of sculpture, which will now attract attention to him as a working artist, he married the model. That's Elizabeth Barberi. They will stay married for the rest of their lives. She will outlive him by about 3 months, dying in December of 1957. He died in September of 57. They never had children. It's a very loving relationship, though, very much suited for each other. And with a name like Barberi, of course, she was from Italian descent, which hand in glove, right? So Coppini now has a little bit of a portfolio. So when this guy from San Antonio, Texas, calls up the Roman Bronze Works, which is where Coppini has been working. A lot of the Italians hung out at Roman Bronze Works. They loved the lost wax method. The Bronze Works management, they were Italians. So it was a good place for him. Coppini was literally sitting at a bench making a bust of William McKinley. When the manager of the Bronze Works comes by and says, some jerk from San Antonio called, his name is Frank TSHA, he needs somebody to make some bronze statues for him, and he needs them fast. You interested? And of course, Coppini thought, man, cowboys and Indians, it's going to be really cool. Wait till I tell Lizzie. Well, Lizzie wasn't thrilled. But off he went on a train, lands in San Antonio, and discovered it's not at all cowboys and Indians, but it was very European. And he loved that. He hated TSHA, because TSHA is an angry man who is now saddled with this Italian artist that's going to outshine him. TSHA had already done a stone statue of Jefferson Davis. The committee had looked at it and said, no, that's not what we want. Get somebody to do a bronze one. That's how Coppini ended up in San Antonio in 1901. He knows a little bit of English by this time. TSHA says, okay, how much do you want? And Coppini gave him a figure, and TSHA said no. And so they finally settled that TSHA would pay him for 3 months' work at a certain amount of money, which was about $5 an hour, ridiculous amount of money. And Coppini said, that's great. And that was set upon. And then Coppini called TSHA up in about 6 weeks and said, it's done. The model's done. You said you wanted to model in 3 months. You're going to pay that much money? Great. I know it's only 6 weeks, but the model's done. So TSHA races down there and discovers that the plaster model is fantastic. He brings in the committee. The committee says, this is wonderful. We want him to do all 5 of the statues. TSHA and Coppini were never friends. Coppini, for the rest of his life, will always sneeringly refer to TSHA as, oh, that stone cutter. One of the worst epithets you could sling as a good sculptor. And Coppini goes on to create all 5 statues on this. The committee is thrilled to death, and suddenly Coppini has a new home. He likes San Antonio and Texas like him, especially the crowd that are all hooked up now in the City Beautiful movement of the progressive era. And this is a national movement. All these cities in America now wanted to look like European cities with statues of their great and honored dead and their great past leaders. So now they would go and do it in their towns. And if you're in Texas, that's going to include a lot of Confederate statues, because the state government's not putting any money into this yet. This is all private groups. And who's out there on the landscape? The UDC, the SRTs, the DRTs, all the Sons of Confederate Veterans, United Confederate Veterans. The heritage organizations are the ones paying decent money. Now, it's not the money you'd make in New York. If you were in New York, you could make $50,000 for a statue. But Coppini's going to be paid $5,000 to $10,000 a piece for a series of statues over the next 10 years that will make his reputation among the heritage groups. The first was at Paris, Texas, where again, he's got that classic style, and he's also winning a lot of attention because he refuses to do just knock it out, what he called robot statues. Now, I'm not sure where he got that word that early, but robot statues, probably Jules Verne or something. The ones you see that are precast, they all look about the same, they're all staring out. He wanted his to look lifelike and natural, like they just walked off the parade ground. So you can see this early on. He's not the robot statue, and people liked that. He cast it in high-quality bronze, uses Roman bronze works most of the time, so he costs more than if you called up the guys in Marietta, Georgia, or St. Louis, Missouri, and bought a precast statue, but you're going to get quality work. And that's what the word is spreading around. And this is a good example. It still stands in Parrish, Texas, with a Confederate soldier on the top. Another hallmark. He always liked to put a regular soldier on the top because he thought there's the ones we should honor, not the leaders. But then people want to remember the leaders, so he's got the busts around the bottom to memorialize their names too, because after all, there's a committee paying the bill for this, and he does want them to pay. This caught the attention of a group of guys in Austin, headquartered in Austin, Terry's Texas Rangers. They wanted to build the greatest ever Confederate monument in Texas. So they call up Coppini, and there was a competitive bidding. Coppini won it. The reason Coppini really wanted to do this is an equestrian bronze is like the penultimate thing you can do as a bronze artist of the neoclassic movement of the early half of the 20th century. You have to do two statues. You have to make the rider and the horse and then marry them. Just so. It's huge. This thing weighs around 15,000 pounds of bronze. He had to go to the hospital for 3 weeks after finishing this. Heat stroke, smashed his hand, but by God, he got it done. And it was generally well received. It's an amazing piece of work, not only as an engineering feat, but artistically as well. They couldn't, the dye, the base for it is Texas limestone by direction of the committee. They wanted it to be a Texas stone. It weighs 25 tons. Do the math. Oh my God. This could not be brought across even the railroad bridge across the Colorado into the city of Austin. They had to bring it up the railroad, drop it off on the far side of the river. And it wasn't a lake at that time, it was a river. And fortunately, it goes pretty dry in the summer. And then wrap logs, tied logs all around it, and then roll this 25-ton piece of rock up Congress Avenue with levers and dropped it into place. For Coppini to walk over and go, maybe don't. This is where it's going to stay. He was extremely proud of this piece of work. His father even visited while he was doing this from Italy and held up buckets of plaster while Coppini is up inside the belly of the horse smoothing the plaster out in the plaster cast. That's part of what dehydrated him and sent him to the hospital. It's 106 degrees, and the plaster is about 145 degrees, so he's lucky he didn't asphyxiate up in there. But it's a beautiful piece of work. A lot of detail in the book about who the models are and the horses and all that. Actually, this is Coppini's carriage horse. And to keep the horse looking like this, Coppini fed him half rations for several weeks to get him antsy, and then he would have his black assistant go boo every 3 or 4 minutes, so the horse would keep looking like that until he got the right piece. An artist has to struggle for his work, guys. One of the guys on that committee, George W. Littlefield, rich banker in Austin, right? If Terry's Texas Rangers has a cool monument on the Capitol grounds, then by golly, Hood's Texas Brigade needs one too. So they contacted Coppini and turned down his bid. They went with Louis Amateus, who's another famous sculptor we could talk about. And Amateus then bowed out of the project, so they ended up getting a precast from a company up in Chicago. It showed up on the railroad car, one leg shorter than the other, a bent gun, and ugly. They refused to take it off the railroad car. We are not paying you for that. Okay, so now they only got a couple $1,000s left. Maybe they could scrape a third $1,000 up from some of the committee members. And they're fussing around, and Littlefield said, I know who we can get. I know the guy who'll do it. He'll do it fast, he'll do it well, and we can get him to work with the budget. And the committee doesn't want to go back to Coppini because he insulted them. He told them when they walked away from him the first time, y'all are idiots, and you're going to get crap, and you deserve it. Well, now they got crap, and they deserved it, and they're going to have to go back and apologize to him. So they made Littlefield do it, which is kind of funny. But Littlefield was on the committee for the Terry's Texas Monument, and he knew what Coppini would do for the Texas Brigade. Sure enough, he produced this. Now, the base has already been contracted with the Marietta Company. All Coppini had to do was produce the statue on the top. And once again, it's a Confederate soldier in a very natural type pose with all the other things that the committee likes to have on their base. This is where his imagination gets to launch out a little bit. Palestine decides they want to honor John H. Reagan, Postmaster General of the Confederacy, U.S. Senator, and first Texas Railroad Commissioner, hometown boy. Now, this will take years for the money to finally get put together. This will be put up in several different parks, but the fun part of this is they wanted Reagan and an image that symbolized the lost cause of the Confederacy, the lost cause. You tell an Italian artist you need an image of the tragedy of the lost cause. You're going to get a Roman legionnaire, aren't you? Congratulations. He actually originally did have a spear. They have to hide it now in the museum because people keep breaking it off. I show this to my students in my class, and Terry knows, he was one of my graders. I say, they think it's Gollum. That's the only reference they got. No, children, look, legionnaire. He actually had this cast in Rome at a big, famous casting place, probably because he took the excuse to take the first trip home that he had taken since he had left Italy in 1896. This would be 1908. He's got the Palestine's Reagan statue out, and it still stands there today. That's why you may have noticed it's a little different color, a little different patina, a little different mix of the bronze. Personal favorite, my personal favorite. Well, Victoria, well, gosh, if Palestine has a nice one and Austin has 3 and Paris, by golly, Victoria needs their Coppini statue. So he managed to back them down. They wanted the usual standing on top with the bust around. He said, I will give you the best ever Confederate statue. And he gave them this. It's called The Last Stand or the Firing Line. What it is a Confederate soldier in the last days of the war. He's wounded. He hadn't eaten much, but he's still got a rifle, 40 rounds, and he's about to charge with his colleagues down into the Union camp below. It may be over, but it ain't over till it's over, that kind of thing, right? If you could get up on these pictures, if you ever go see it, the musculature, the veins, the work in his arms, every fiber of his, the detail in this is just breathtaking, and it would be a real shame to lose it. It's safe, though, because I took some time finding this because nobody in Victoria would tell me where their Confederate statue was, because they don't have one. He's a Minuteman now. He's got a UDC marker on his back, on the back of that plinth, but it's their Minuteman. So public memory can work in favor of some good things, right? He's safe. He's not a Confederate. Anybody in here collect guns? Know a little bit about old guns? There's a problem with this? Yeah, model 1873, war ended in 65. Yeah, so what does an Italian artist know about guns, right? Obviously not a whole hell of a lot. I've actually seen the plaster cast for this gun. It's in a museum, and it's a trapdoor. He did it on purpose. But I think this is a fantastic piece, and I think it's fun how things in public memory migrate and become far different than what the artist intended. And why would a Minuteman from Lexington be standing in Victoria, Texas? I don't know. Here's one in disguise also. This is the last truly Confederate monument that he ever made, and this was in 1915. He'll live another 42 years and never make another Confederate, per se, statue. Why does it look like this? Because the ladies in Corpus didn't have any money. So they called him up and said, we would like you to make us something for $1,000. And he said, no. I have a student. Why don't you get one of them? No, we want you. Well, they cheated. He's a Rotarian. He's a longtime Mason. So they got all their Rotarian and Mason husbands to call him up and beg and work on him. And so they agreed on a concrete statue. This is cast stone. And what it is the Queen City of Corpus, Queen City of the Gulf, with Neptune on one side and Queen of the Sea on the other. It's very fanciful. It's not exactly his normal work, but it's what you get when you call him up and press him into a corner for $1,000. It's an interesting variation of the kind of work that he would do. By this time, he's really branching out into other areas. Universities have decided they want their statues, so he does Burleson for Baylor. He does Sol Ross. Not Sol Ross the warrior, Sol Ross the president of A&M University, which, any Aggies in here? I understand they still go put pennies at the feet and all that sort of thing for good luck. He had a shot at doing Sol Ross the warrior, the Confederate. He gave a price tag to Waco of $7,500 and gave him a model of basically Sol Ross on a rearing horse splitting an enemy's head open with his sword, which they liked, but they never got the money together. That would definitely be a Confederate statue, and perhaps better that we never finished that one. That never got done. This is a much better way to remember Sol Ross because, after all, in all of his life, he was 4 years a Confederate and many years governor or president of a university, and secretly the first guy who let women attend classes at A&M. All of this leads back to one of his greatest sculptures ever on the landscape of Texas. George W. Littlefield has given lots of gifts to UT Austin, and he wants to give one last big one. He wants the world's biggest Confederate monument, and he's got $250,000 to pay for it. Coppini says, I don't want to do the world's biggest Confederate monument. By this time, it's 1920. World War I is over. What's on Coppini's mind is who, by the way, he's moved to Chicago by this time. So he's working a lot with World War I monuments in the Chicago area. He's thinking how amazing it is that the South fell in with the rest of the nation and won this great war in Europe. Wouldn't it be great to have a monument to the children of the UT who fought and died and secured liberty for the people of Europe? Littlefield grumbled. They would visit. Back and forth they go. Signed an open-ended contract, and Littlefield died. Bingo, right? You got your $250. The grumbly boss is dead, so you can do what you want. So Coppini quickly puts together a model, and this is what it looked like up top. Well, unfortunately for him, the university hired a cranky little Philadelphia architect named Paul Crett, who didn't like Coppini and didn't like his model. And it's university land, so he's going to have to follow rules. What Coppini had in mind was an outdoor cathedral. That as you walked up with this reflecting pool in the center, which you'll see he's kind of minimized, there would be these 6 statues going up to the 1, 2, 3 on each side. The first 2 on your flanks as you walk past is the South leadership of the Civil War. That's Robert E. Lee and Albert Sidney Johnston. The next 2 as you walk up either side are going to be representatives of the New South. On one side was John H. Reagan, senator, and the other side was James Stephen Hogg, governor, who wasn't a Confederate soldier, but his daddy was. So these are the New South. And then, as you reached up to this highest altar, just like you're walking through the Stations of the Cross in a cathedral in Italy somewhere, you reach the penultimate message. You see the president of the Confederacy, the defeated Confederacy, and the victorious president who led us to victory in World War I, who was from where? The South. And that's what it was supposed to be all about. And there's a big plaque on the back that they recently removed that explains that. This is a World War I monument. Kretz said, no, I don't like it. So he expands the pool, puts the central figure, and what is that? That is Liberty, or Columbia, our Columbia, being drawn across the ocean by mermen to deliver the message of victory, peace, and democracy to all of Europe. J. Frank Dobie lost his mind when he saw this. Merman? What the F is a merman? You know, it's okay, J. Frank. You can just go have a little beer. It'll be fine. He and Coppini hated each other. You can see, where are the statues? Where are the plinths? They're gone. The statues are shoved onto a mall behind it. Whereas Coppini told Kret in a meeting and then wrote a letter, people, and he wrote this in 1928, people are now going to come to this thing and not understand at all what it's about. And what they're going to want to do is take it down. He wasn't wrong, was he? With all the pieces disconnected, it doesn't mean anything. It can become whatever you wish it to be. And so it was. And so Coppini loses his fight, and over many years of work, it'll take him about 12, 13 years to finish all the pieces. He'll get it all put together, and he'll get his money, but he will not be happy with it. Now, for us, it looks beautiful, doesn't it? But then, you know, as what he said came to light, all six of these statues, including the one he thought was his best ever, Robert E. Lee, got removed and are now in storage somewhere, we don't know where. And occasionally, and I'm going to be ugly about this because I told you I would, UT will issue statements about how certain statues are on display on their campus. They're not. It's UT. They're lying. It's what they do. I've been battling them since I enrolled there as a graduate student 40 years ago. I got a big portfolio. But yeah, it's kind of sad, but it is something. People, when they go to the museum, to the university, though, that's one of the big things that sticks in their head is that beautiful fountain. And so far, there's not been a lot of talk about taking the fountain down. Some, but not much. Their next target is to remove the George Washington statue behind it. That's what they'll be taking that out before too long. Other statues in the 30s under the Centennial contracts, he does Reb Baylor at Baylor University. Recently, this was moved to a new spot. And then, of course, George Washington. Texas, got his third George Washington. And if it gets removed, it'll be his third George Washington to be removed. Mexico City in 1911. Then we invaded Veracruz in 1914, so all the Mexicans got angry, tore down the Coppini statue of Washington in Mexico City, dragged it around the city. He had a company retrieve it under a contract from some rich guys down, repaired it and put it back up. But if you go to even Wikipedia or anything now, it'll tell you that the statue is actually a gift from the U.S. government in 1916. I'm sorry, I can show you the documents, the invoices, et cetera. But, so it got yanked down. Portland, Oregon, you may remember a few years ago, that's the one they pulled down, urinated upon, poured red paint on it, set it on fire. That was Coppini's. He had done his second Washington for them. Coppini will have statues in 12 states before it's over in 3 different countries. So at UT Austin, we now have the last remaining undamaged and unremoved Washington statue. And it was actually the first one in the state of Texas. So I'm thinking we might want to keep it, but I'm kind of biased. There are things he does for emotion. He's an Italian. He can't help himself. One of the things that brought him to Texas in the first place was the Galveston flood. They had a big fundraiser, and he won the award for the best monument to the victims of the Galveston flood. It was a little different than this. This is what he created by 1907. It won an award at the St. Louis World's Fair, but it's plaster. The city fathers of Galveston took one look at it and said, we can't put that on the beach. It's too sad. It is sad. Do you see the arm? That's her dying husband, drowning. That baby, is he? Is he alive? It's a debate. So you can see, you know, people come bopping down in their floppy hats with their little umbrellas like, whoa, bummer. What happened to this is still a bit of big debate. It was given, he gilded, he thin bronzed the plaster, gave it with a bunch of others to UT Austin, and they lost all of them, about 1914. There is a Coppini monument to victims of the Galveston flood in Galveston, but you have to go to the Lakewood Cemetery. It's the Woodmen of the World monument over here on the left. That's dedicated to all the Woodmen of the World, members of the insurance fraternal organization who died in the flood. Woodmen of the World loved it so much they had him do a second one in Memphis, and then he did a third one, slightly different, of Alfred Falkberg in Denver. His reputation's growing, right? This is Charlie. Charlie was a 21-year-old fellow who was out roping cattle one day, and his horse threw him, and he broke his neck and died. Daddy wanted a monument to Charlie, and he knew the most famous sculptor in Texas, this is about 1920, was Coppini, 1919. So he contacted him, and Coppini said, I learned a lesson and not underestimated. I said, I looked at this cold country guy in a pair of overalls, and I cut him a deal at $10,000, and he pulled out his checkbook and wrote the check. He said, I realized I probably could ask. But by the time he finished it, and it took him a little time, you know, about 9 months, Dad had given up on living on his Texas land anymore and moved to Orlando, Florida. And so he donated it to Ballinger, Texas. So if you go out to Ballinger, Texas, there's Charlie with his horse on the courthouse grounds there. Longtime Mason, they built one of the largest Masonic halls, temples in the state in San Antonio, and they decided they wanted the only allegorical bronze doors in America on theirs. And guess who they talked into making it? By this time, Coppini's living in New York, but he will make these. It's fantastic work. You have George Washington and all these images of the Revolution on one side, the American Revolution, and Sam Houston and all the images of the Texas Revolution on the other. Absolutely gorgeous piece of work. Again, a gift from, in many ways, from Coppini to his fellow Masons. What brings Coppini back to Texas permanently, and what he thinks he wanted to be best remembered for, is how he rebranded Texas. And that's a story that starts in 1910. Told you all these private organizations were putting up Confederate statues, right? Well, that doesn't sell. Let's just be honest. You're trying to bring in northern financiers, new people, new business. You want something that's a more inclusive brand than Moonlight Magnolias, Cotton, Slavery, and Confederates. So the Texas legislature started putting aside money to start telling people the story, not of the Confederate Texas, but the Texas of the Republic. They had never done much of anything to save any of this stuff up until this time, but it was a deliberate effort to rebrand us as Western, a more inclusive brand than Confederate Texas. First start Gonzales, right? Where was the first shot fired? And who do you hire to make your statue? Coppini. Come and take it, Gonzales, 1910. You got to have a monument to your great commander-in-chief, don't you? Sam Houston, 1911. Coppini fought this like a dog. You'll notice it's not bronze. He lost. You want to do the contract? You want the money? Do it in Texas granite. So it's in Texas granite. What about our great father of Texas, moldering in a grave some up there at Peach Point Plantation? Well, let's have a Texas State Cemetery. Well, let's dig him up and bring him to Texas, to Austin, have a parade, whatever's left of him, and we'll get him a proper burial marker. Pompeo Coppini. By the way, What's this? It's the Bellamy Salute. William Bellamy in 1892, Congress adopted this as when they sang the Star-Spangled Banner, this is what you did to the American flag. It's the William R. Bellamy Salute. Now, they changed this in 1942. Anybody got a notion why? Yeah, that's why I throw that picture in. You should see docents at the Texas State Cemetery turning themselves inside out, trying to explain what the hell Austin's doing. He's pointing the way to the west. No, he's not. He's waving at the American flag. No. He's pointing to the Capitol building. Ma'am, he's just saluting the flag the way he would be saluting the American flag at the time Coppini made this, which was 1911. Now, you need a Betsy Ross. Well, we had to go dig her up, too. She was in Georgia. But this is Joanna Troutman. She made the flag of the Georgia Battalion, which is one of the flags that we know flew at different battles in the Republic. She never came to Texas. And you can imagine the daughters, sorry if any of y'all are here, but they did get their nose a little out of joint about this. Why don't we get a real Texas woman who did a Texas flag? No, Governor Culbertson and the guys with money wanted Joanna. And we had that flag in the archive. So Coppini did this. Took him about 12 years to get paid for this, which is part of why he moves off to Chicago shortly after this. Now, long gap as he works on many other things, but he still loved Texas, and he was always fishing for a way to get back to Texas, the Centennial. He submits his bid for every state when they had special events all the way through 1952 had silver half dollars minted by the U.S. Mint. Coppini's design won for Texas for the Centennial. It is victory, liberty, over the Alamo. There's Sam Houston on one side, see the American Eagle over the Texas Star, always unifying both those threads of nationalism and loyalty. The die cutter at the Treasury said, I am not making that coin. It's ugly, it's too busy, and it'll break. It remains to this day the #1 seller. It was a fantastic hit, and Coppini was right again, but if you just asked him, he would have told you he was. He got the contract for the statues out front that you saw coming in. And then the Italian-American Club of Dallas wanted their little contribution remembered. So if you go down to the other end of the building outside, over by the Bear, you'll see Prospero Bernardi, the only Italian who fought at the Battle of San Jacinto. But Coppini did him. And that's him working on Prospero. I always kind of like to get a picture when they're working on it. But his big paycheck, and it was big, it was $150,000 he got for doing the monument at the Alamo, the cenotaph. Now, he wasn't the architect. He did not choose the silo format. He was not happy with it, but you have to go with what the team says. But he did do all the sculptures around it, and he did, of course, the spirit of sacrifice, the figure rising from the burning bodies on the back, and, of course, the Texas figure, the lady on the front. Notice, too, and I've told you about this, he's carving, but he hadn't put the clothes on him yet, has he? It goes in stages. By the time this gets dedicated in the early 40s, Coppini is 70 years old. He's beginning to slow down a bit. It's a lot of hard work doing these big, heavy statues. So when Trinity University comes to town, they make him their director of the art department. He stood that for a few years and then opened up his own academy across town in his studio. It's called the Coppini Academy of Fine Arts. He didn't put that name on it. A bunch of his directors did when he was back home on a trip to Italy, and then told him when he got back. It's best to deal with him that way. His partner in there was Waldine Talk. She's his longtime assistant. She's been working with him since 1910, living with him since 1910. She was the daughter he and Lizzie never had. This is some of her work. I would call your attention to the R.L. Thornton statue out front of this building. That's Waldine Taw's work. So there's a second generation Coppini out front. He's a busy fellow, isn't he? She also did the Texas Ranger that got removed over at Love Field recently, and she did the Moses Austin that still stands in San Antonio, and many others that you have seen. Coppini doesn't quit. He just kind of goes on smaller projects, and these are a few of them. He still stayed busy with the colleges. This is J. Frank Norris of Arlington Bible College. George Storch, who is a contributor to the museums and the library at Trinity University. And then he did a co-authored work with Waldine called Genius of Music out in front of the Tuesday Music Club, excuse me. He did write his memoirs. If you want to know why Coppini, after all this apparent success, is just totally pissed off, read this book. He wants you to know how he's been done wrong and how people just don't understand his pure genius. There are times I would love to meet and sit down with him so I could finish this book. There are times that I think I'd probably just run screaming and out the door. Time catches up with all of us. 1957, he passed away. His wife survives him, Waldine survives him. Waldine will run his academy all the way up into the 80s for another 20, 30 years before she passes away. Who would do the monument for Pompeo Coppini? He would. Who the hell would do? You wouldn't ever let some second-class clown do your monument. So he had this actually put up in 1953. It is a piece of work. And I think it just encapsulates him so well. I'll read what he wrote. 3 life-size figures emerge from a tripod spirit lamp with clouds of smoke ascending and forming a background. The figure of Father Time places his proper right hand over the wrist of the artist, capital A, while the artist offers a sketch of the atom. Of course, artists know all, right, including atomic particle physics, and looks up to the sky at the figures of Minerva and Gloria seeking their judgment in his claim for fame. Behind the artist is his wife, pleading with Father Time not to stop him. Above all the figures is the eye of God, representing the great light of Judgment Day. Now, that's a monument, isn't it? This sucker's 10 feet high. Go up, over to Sunset Cemetery, right off of Broadway. Don't worry that you won't be able to find it. As soon as you turn in, you see that thing. It's right there in front of the main flagpole. It's a real striking piece of work, and it really encapsulates what he thought his place would be. By the way, Lizzie is on the left-hand side in the other box, and where you see the urn, that's where Waldine's ashes are entombed after she died. So she's there with him. They're all 3 together. But he's been forgotten. Some of his subject matter is not what we would like to have on our landscape, perhaps. His style is not in keeping with the modern style of art. I've had a real struggle with some of the modern artists because they really don't care for the style. They use such discerning technical terms as hack, which is kind of hurtful. However, he remains extremely popular. People every day go past his work at the Alamo or at UT Austin or at Baylor or here at the Hall of State, and they're intrigued. They want to know. And I also would argue, and wrap it up with this, that when people think of what did Stephen F. Austin look like, or Sam Houston, or Reb Baylor, they often think of the statues that they saw that were made by a very egotistical but very talented little artist from Italy who found a home in Texas.